Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. I'm glad you're joining us.
Hello there. Yes, welcome.
Today, we're doing something a bit special. We're diving deep into just one session from the Law of One series.
That's right. Session 46 specifically. This is material our listeners provided, and it's a fascinating snapshot.
It really is. And just for context, if you're new to this, the Law of One material is presented as channeled communication.
From an entity called Ra, it explores, the nature of reality, consciousness, pretty deep stuff.
Definitely. And session 46 touches on quite a range, doesn't it? From very practical concerns to big philosophical questions.
It does. It starts with concern for the instrument, the channeler, Carla Ruckert, and her physical well-being.
Yeah, which we'll get into. Our plan today is to go through this session pretty much question by question.
Pulling out the key ideas, exploring what Ra might be getting at.
So let's jump right in. The very first question, 46.1, is about the instrument's condition.
Right. And Ra's response is, well, it's pretty direct. Extremely low physical energy.
They mentioned she's been under attack, didn't they?
Yeah.
For weeks.
Yes, an ongoing thing. But, crucially, her vital energy, the deeper life force, was apparently restoring itself gradually.
That contrast is striking, isn't it? Rock bottom physically, yet still able to facilitate this contact.
It really makes you think about the connection, or maybe the separation, between physical energy and consciousness or vital energy.
Okay, so moving to 46.2. This one shifts focus quite a bit.
It does. The questioner, Don Elkleams, brings up a personal concern from his meditation. It involves their cats, Gandalf and Fairchild.
Cats, okay, how do they fit in?
Well, they had a vet visit coming up, teeth cleaning, removing a small growth on Gandalf, and Don felt there might be some Orion group influence connected to it.
Orion group.
Yep.
The negatively oriented entities in the Law of One.
Exactly. He was worried about potential interference or attack, possibly related to this mundane event.
Interesting. So, like, using the vet visit as an in.
Potentially. Ra confirms Gandalf, described as harvestable third density.
Meaning ready to potentially graduate to fourth density.
Correct. Ra says Gandalf is vulnerable to psychic attack, similar to humans, often through images or dreams, implanting negative thoughts.
Wow. So even our pets aren't necessarily shielded from this stuff.
Apparently not, especially if their consciousness is developing. But Fairchild, the other cat, was less vulnerable.
Why the difference?
Ra mentions Fairchild having less mind-complex activity in the distortion of conscious devotion, maybe less intellectual analysis, more simple being.
Suggesting a certain kind of focused devotion might act as a shield?
That seems to be the implication.
Yeah.
Quite subtle. Then Ra offers protection advice.
Okay, what do they suggest?
Two things. First, meditation, specifically putting on the armor of light.
Ah, visualizing protective energy. That sounds familiar from other traditions.
It is a common practice. The second suggestion was more specific.
Go on.
Repeating short ritual sentences that the instrument, Carla, knew from an establishment Ra says distorts spiritual oneness.
Wait, using sentences from a source Ra considers distorted.
Yeah, that's the intriguing part. Ra says her familiarity is enough, and repeating them acts like an alert to certain discarnate entities who also know them, sort of like an energetic password or warning signal.
So using existing knowledge, even from a flawed source, as a practical tool, that's pragmatic.
Very. It's not about the purity of the source in this context, but its functional effect in the unseen realms.
Then there's a bit of confusion, right? In 46.3 and 46.4.
Yes. Don, the questioner, admits he doesn't know the specific ritual sentences Ra is referring to.
There's a pause recorded.
And then Don assumes Carla does know them, which Ra confirms.
It highlights again how the communication relies on the instrument's existing mental landscape, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Ra is accessing her knowledge base.
Okay, then question 46.5 goes back to Gandalf's leg. The growth.
Right. Don asks about its cause and if it's dangerous.
And Ra's answer.
Ra refers back to previous material on the cause, which we don't have right here, but importantly says the danger to the physical body is slight.
Why slight?
Because of the lack of repeated stimulus to anger in Gandalf.
Ah, there it is. The anger connection, again foreshadowing the later discussion.
Exactly. Even in an animal, the absence of sustained anger is seen as limiting the physical danger of a growth.
Fascinating. Then, in 46.6, Dawn shows concern again for Carla's low energy, asks if they should stop.
Understandable concern, but Ra's response is quite firm.
What does Ra say?
Basically, that Carla's dedication makes her physical state irrelevant to continuing the session, although Ra assures them they are monitoring her vital signs closely.
Wow. That's intense dedication on her part and theirs.
It really underscores how important they felt this communication was, willing to push limits.
Which leads us into the real core of this session, I think, starting with 46.7.
Definitely. The questions about anger, polarity, and Cancer.
Dawn asks if anger has the same physical effect, potentially causing cancer, in service to self-entities as it does in service to others.
A great question. And Ra's answer is nuanced. They say the catalytic mechanisms, the triggers for change.
Like anger.
Right. Those mechanisms themselves don't depend on your polarity. What matters is how you use the energy, how you engage with that catalyst.
So it's about the processing, not the emotion itself.
Precisely. Ra states that entities who are consciously using anger to polarize, whether positively or negatively, are doing that work mentally.
Meaning they aren't just letting it fester physically.
Exactly. They're directing it with intention.
Hmm.
So it doesn't automatically lead to the same physical imbalances like cancer in the same way it might for someone not consciously working with it.
Okay, that needs unpacking. Dawn asks for examples in 46.8, right?
He does. And 46.9 gives this incredibly detailed breakdown. Let's start with the positive path.
How does a positively oriented entity deal with anger, according to Ra?
Okay, first, they perceive the anger arising. Then, crucially, they consciously choose to bless it and love it within themselves.
Love the anger. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but it's about acceptance. Then, they mentally intensify it.
Why intensify it?
To see its nature clearly, to see the folly, as Ra puts it, of raw, undirected red ray energy. Ra calls this spiritual entropy. Random, chaotic energy.
Okay, so see it for what it is, then what?
Then, using will and faith, they seek to understand it, accept it fully, and integrate it.
Integrate the anger.
Yes, the energy is transformed. The other self, the person or situation that triggered the anger, becomes an object of acceptance and understanding, not blame. The anger's energy is basically recycled for growth and integration.
It sounds like internal alchemy, turning lead into gold, emotionally speaking.
That's a great way to put it. Taking destructive potential and transmuting it through love and understanding.
Okay, now contrast that with a negative path. How do they handle anger?
They also consciously use it, but the goal isn't acceptance, it's control.
Control.
Yes. They refuse to let the anger be random or undirected. They consciously funnel that energy, using their will and faith, into practical ways to gain control over the other person or the situation.
So anger becomes a weapon, essentially, a tool for manipulation.
A focused tool for exerting will and achieving dominance. Control is the keyword for the negative path.
Two vastly different ways of working with the same energy.
Absolutely. And Ra then explains where Cancer fits in. It's in the middle ground.
What do you mean, middle ground?
When anger is random, undirected, not consciously processed through either acceptance or control, that's when it can create the physical analog, the bodily condition of cancer.
So it's the unprocessed, unengaged with emotion that's the danger physically.
Right.
Regardless of your overall intention.
That seems to be exactly Ra's point here. Lack of conscious engagement is key.
Dawn tries to clarify this in 46.1, suggesting maybe it's failure to accept the other person positive or control the other person negative that causes it.
Right, but Ra corrects him subtly in 46.11. It's crucial. Ra says the first acceptance or control must be of the self.
Internal first.
Yes. You have to accept or control the anger within yourself as part of yourself before you can effectively use that energy according to your path, whether that's integrating or dominating.
So for a negative entity, if they can't control their own anger,
Then that lack of self-control, that internal chaos, can manifest as cancer because their whole path is predicated on control. Repressed, uncontrolled energy becomes toxic to their system.
which leads Dawn to ask in 46.1, what exactly is being repressed by the negative entity?
Good question. Ross says it's the disorganized emotional distortions, the messy, unpredictable parts of the emotional landscape. These need to be repressed or rigidly controlled to effectively use energy for negative polarization.
Can you give the example Raw used?
Yes, a powerful one.
Mhm.
Consciously controlling or suppressing sexual desire to more effectively dominate someone else later, when allowing that desire expression might be permissible but less strategic for control.
Wow. That shows intense, calculated manipulation of one's own drives for external power.
It really illustrates the level of intentionality and, well, repression involved in that path.
Then, 46.13 draws the contrast. Dawn points out that positive entities focus on balancing emotions, not repressing them.
And Rack confirms this is correct. It's the path of unity integrating all aspects of the self, not denying or suppressing parts.
Balance versus repression, a fundamental difference.
Clearly laid out.
Okay, shifting gears slightly in 46.12. Don wonders if cancer itself acts as a sort of training catalyst.
Yeah, like it's consciously trying to push you further down your chosen path, positive or negative.
Ra corrects that idea, right?
Yes, a very important clarification. Ra says catalyst, in general, is unconscious. It's not an intelligent force with an agenda.
So it's not teaching in that sense.
No, it's part of the fundamental learn-teach mechanism of the universe, set up by the sublogos way back before our space-time even began. It just is.
But if it's unconscious, Don asks in 46.15, how does it teach anything, especially if the person isn't aware of the dynamic?
Ra first points out that catalyst isn't always used. People don't always learn from experiences.
Okay, fair point.
But the purpose of catalyst, like cancer, is simply to offer experience. That's its function. Yes. And in third density, that experience presents a choice, consciously or unconsciously. Accept and love it, the positive path, or try to control and separate from it, the negative path.
So the experience itself forces a kind of leaning.
Over time, yes. If you don't consciously choose, the catalyst continues, life after life if necessary, until a bias towards one way of responding, acceptance, love, or separation control forms. There's plenty of time for this.
So it's less about conscious training and more about the universe offering experiences that inevitably nudge you towards choosing a path.
That seems to be the essence of it. The catalyst provides the raw material. Our response determines the polarization.
Okay. Now, the very last big question, 46.1 said it. This one goes into higher densities.
Right. Don asked about the purpose of polarized social memory complexes, group souls in fourth density and beyond. He even brings in Coulomb's law, like electrical polarity.
The fascinating question. What did Ra say?
Well, this is where the instrument's fatigue really shows. Ra basically says Carla is too weary to answer that fully right now.
So the answer is deferred.
Yes. Ra mentions maybe doing 2 sessions a week might be possible despite her condition. Thanks the group for their fidelity, but asks for only brief queries now. Leaves us hanging on that big question.
It really does. Hints at complex dynamics in higher densities related to polarity. Something for later exploration, perhaps.
Definitely sets up future potential insights.
The session then wraps up with 46.18, a practical question.
Just asking what more they can do for Carla's comfort and the contact.
And Ra's response.
Reassurance, mostly. Says the group is doing well, supporting her. She remains steady, calls them conscientious.
That must have been good to hear.
I imagine so. But also a gentle warning not to get lax about the physical setup, the alignment of the objects used in the ritual. Details matter.
Right. Grounded advice amidst the cosmic insights.
A perfect blend, really. And then the final farewell from Ra.
Go forth, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite creator, Adonai.
Adonai, beautiful closing.
So, reflecting on this whole session,
Rare.
a lot packed in there.
It really is. The vulnerability of the instrument, that dedication.
The surprising bit about psychic influence, even on pets.
And then the massive piece on anger. How we engage with it, acceptance or control being key.
That distinction feels incredibly important. Not the anger itself, but the conscious processing.
And the idea that unprocessed, undirected emotion is what potentially leads to physical issues like cancer, regardless of polarity.
Yeah, and redefining Catalyst not as a teacher, but as an offering of experience.
An offering that pushes us eventually to choose a path through our response, acceptance or control, love or separation.
It shifts the perspective on challenges, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Less like punishment, more like an experiential prompt.
Exactly. And of course, that tantalizing unanswered question about the purpose of polarized group souls later on.
Leaves you wanting more.
For sure.
So perhaps a final thought for you listening. Reflect on how you tend to meet challenging emotions, especially something like anger. Do you find yourself leaning towards wanting to understand and accept it within yourself?
Or is your first instinct maybe to push it away, control it, or control the situation that triggered it?
Based on what Ross shared here, what might the implications of your habitual response be? Just something to ponder.
A deep reflection indeed. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Session 46.
Namaste. I am you, and you are me.